I actually think Cristian Romero's managed now to hit an embarrassing new low in his Tottenham career, as he and his people have allowed an interview to drop where he makes clear his desire to leave the club just after a defeat in which he yet again showed his familiar failings. What a player he could have been for Spurs. But once again, he's shown his priorities lie elsewhere. I'm joined today by Sonny Snelling to discuss that, the fallout from last night's defeat to Forest, and more on today's Daily Tottenham news. Sonny, how are you, mate?
Yes, I'm good. As I said before I joined, I'm good, but our football team isn't good. But I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about today, aren't we?
We definitely will. But before we get started, let my audience know where they can find you, your YouTube channel and your X and everything like that.
Yeah, so Sonny Talk Spurs on YouTube, and then Sonny Snelling on my TikTok, my Twitter, Instagram, and all that other good stuff. I'm usually doing loads of daily Spurs stuff. Also, yeah, subscribe to Barnaby as well. He's doing some great stuff over here as well.
Top man. And also, Sonny, tell them a little bit about you've got a newish show on TalkSport you're doing, haven't you?
Yeah, so it launched. I mean, what a time to launch it. We've got it's called Inside Spurs. It's basically like a bi-weekly Tottenham show that I'm sometimes on with Abby Summers and a few other guests to talk all things Spurs, usually Ange in, Ange out. And I'm sure going into next season, it's going to be very entertaining as well with lots of different guests.
The usual. All right, so let's get started with this Cristian Romero news, because I just think, for me, it's terrible timing. This is the quote I've got. We're in the Europa League semi-finals, and I want to finish the season on a high note. After that, we'll see. My focus is always on growing and looking for new places to continue developing. I need to play in Spain to compete in all the major leagues. Now, listen, on my channel and on all the podcasts and stuff I listen to, I think everyone is almost resigned to the fact that Romero is definitely leaning towards wanting to leave at the very least. But this strikes me as the kind of agent decided talk where he's now trying to put pressure on Daniel Levy to get to a number where other clubs will be willing to go. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's one of the worst things he's done this season. I think walking down the tunnel at Wolves was worse. I did a big video on that, sort of saying that I thought he was a disgrace, and considering the talk that's been around him, linking him to Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid, I've sort of, like you, admitted that I think he's going to be off, and also admitted that I don't think it's the biggest miss, because I feel like some people have called him world class. Some people have called him the best centre back at the club. I tend to disagree. I feel like we can replace him, or even Kevin Danzo yesterday showed that he's got the capabilities to, come into that back line and make an impact. I just think with this interview, obviously, a lot of people look into it one way and another, and the quotes come out and it's translated as well, into English. So sometimes it does get lost in a bit of translation. I saw the line. I feel like the journalist is feeding him the line, like, what league do you want to play in? And he's going to say La Liga, because a lot of South Americans dream of playing in La Liga. But then when you actually look into the nitty gritty, it does, all you got to do is, join up the dots. And he's pretty much wanting a move away. The problem he's got, Barnaby, is that we bought him for a good fee, and Daniel Levy likes to sell for good fees, and he won't let him go. I can imagine Levy wanting a club record, not a club record, like a defender record. He'd want to be like in the £80 million mark to sell Romero. But will Atletico stump that up? Possibly. They've done it in the past.
I think Atletico Madrid might be more of an option than Real Madrid, to be honest, in terms of some of the money they spent on like João Felix and money they spent on other players before. And Simeone, if he wants someone, he's got so much power at Atletico Madrid that if he really wants one, I feel like that could be an option. And maybe that is why that kind of Spanish, I mean, not just because of Real and Atletico as well, but that thing where he's saying, I want to play in Spain. I think him playing under Simeone seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's the most perfect fit I've ever seen. He's very Simeone-like, and I feel like he'd fit them well because they're looking for another defender. I think they've obviously got Clement Longley of Spurs past, and still got Jimenez. So there is that. I think it is the perfect fit, and I wouldn't begrudge him that move either. It's just this season, even in the earlier parts of the season, a lot of goals were his fault. Stepping out of line, and he hasn't shown himself to be one of the best captains at the club, like many of them haven't. So yeah, it's one of those. I just think it's the timing of it. It's the we've got all this Europa League to do, and we put all our eggs in that basket. And I think what makes it more annoying is he was so fantastic against Frankfurt.
He was.
That was one of his best games. So then it's almost like, and I feel like Spurs is this season, one step forward, two steps back. You can only do one good thing, and then it comes back to bite you on the backside, which is frustrating.
Let me offer you a possibility here then. I think your point about, we spent basically nearly 57 million on him or something like that.
Yeah,
so Levy is going to want a big increase on that. But let me offer you this. We get 80 million pounds on the nose for Romero and then spend 50 of it on Howson from Bournemouth. And we say to him, your next stage of your development you'll come to a bigger Premier League club where you'll still be like first name on the team sheet as centre back, and so your development will continue. And then in 3, 4, 5 years' time, you can then take the next step to a Real Madrid or a Barcelona, something like that. Whereas I feel like the other clubs, all the big clubs are sniffing around Howson, but I don't think he'll be straight in the team anywhere else. So that's a possibility, I think.
Yeah, that list of clubs that have been in talks with his people, it's ours is like the one that sticks out the most, is like he will get prominent game time.
Other than maybe Chelsea, because they're at centre back, they're still not great.
But I mean, Chelsea, would you want to go there with all what's going on? I mean, it's true. I mean, I'd like to pose this to you, Barnaby. What about Gahey? Would you possibly take Gahey at Spurs as a replacement? I mean, it might be a hefty fee, but then again, when Newcastle were bidding for him, he was, his contract was, had a bigger length of time on it. So maybe now, I think he's going into a final year. Would you take him?
I think that's why those Gahey links don't go away. I think Spurs are, they are future planning for Romero leaving it. And maybe that's why they went for Gahey, or were rumoured to have gone for Gahey in the last minute in January. And I think they were willing to go up to 70 or something ridiculous there. So you'd think they'd probably be able to get him for around 50 in the summer. I mean, I was texting my mate who's a Palace fan at the beginning of their game against Man City when they were 2-0 up and should have been 3-0 up. And I was saying, my God, you guys are so good. And he was like, yeah, but you're trying to buy all of our players. And it's like, actually, if I were going to go to Palace and get one of the players, I'd probably go Eza before Gahey. But yes, I would take him. I do like him as a player, but obviously Howson is closer to the current Spurs transfer strategy, younger, and therefore with more of a sell-on fee. So I wonder if they would go for him first.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. It's just, can you get him to the club? Is he a viable option? We've just put ourselves in an awkward situation, haven't we, with our position in the league? I mean, if we win the Europa and get Champions League, then that makes it more of a possibility. But I mean, I just don't know with Spurs. It's hard to know. Like I do transfer videos a lot on my channel, and at the moment, whenever I pour a rumor out, I feel like I'm just like yelling at a brick wall, because I'm like, is this going to happen? No. Is this going to happen? No. There's it's hard to judge it.
That is transfer rumors in general, I'd say. Let me just bring you as we move on to kind of last night's, and I don't want to make this a really long episode, because last night was pretty inevitably disappointing, but also just so, I don't know if you felt this, but so boring to watch. But anyway, here are some stats of the records that Spurs could break in the coming weeks. They need to avoid losing 2 more games to not have their most defeats in a single season. They need 8 more points if they're to surpass their worst points total in the Premier League era. That's from 1992 onwards. They've already suffered their most home defeats in a 38-game season, but another 2 home defeats would surpass their worst total in a 44-game season too, which would be those old seasons that were 6 games more. Ange Postecoglou said, it's another game we have lost where we shouldn't lose. And it's been a big part of our season in that we're just making things really difficult for ourselves in key moments. Just a little bit of concentration, giving away poor goals. It's a shame because our football was outstanding and we totally dominated the game. Even with the 2 goals we conceded, I still feel like we deserved to win the game. At the same time, it's another loss and another unacceptable loss. For us, it's just been a season where at times, even with the challenges we've had, and we've had challenges today, we have to make changes to the team. We had to make changes to the team, but it's really frustrating because our football is so good. Before I ask you about that, I also want to just add in, I don't know if you saw it, but that little bit that Jamie Carragher did after the game for Monday Night Football, where he said, Ange keeps coming out and saying how well they're playing. And that's not, I wouldn't be happy about that if I was a Spurs fan, because the game is about without the ball as much as it is with the ball. And I have to say, rarely, I actually agree with Carragher there. And I think I was saying it during the watch along yesterday on Chris Callan's channel. I was like, if Ange comes out and says how brilliantly we played tonight, I will honestly eat my shoe. And of course he did. And how do you feel about it? Because I think he's he's trying to protect the players, I guess, but more it just feels like he's trying to protect himself, and it just comes across like bollocks.
I mean, I was listening to your Wolves reaction video last week, obviously after the game, and you mentioned it in that video, and I was just like, it's so laughable that he's saying we're playing well in stages where, like, between conceding 2 goals, it's just a circus at the moment when it comes to this reaction. I mean, I'm going to do a video going into the stats and what Jamie Carragher was saying, and it's just, I feel like we've come full circle with Spurs. You mentioned how boring it is, but last night was like watching the early stages of this season when we lose to Newcastle, we draw with Leicester, and there's those bright sparks, but we just look so stale up top. There's no midfield. The defense is all over the place. We're making mistake after mistake. And the point I'd like to make to add to this is a lot of people in my comment section are going, Sonny, you can't blame Ange for this. You can't blame him for the Wolves result. It's individual mistakes. But I believe that individual mistakes also come down to the manager. This is the manager. You said it there. He tells them how to play. He wants them to play like this and make risks and, risks that could end up in rewards. Carragher, he did some really good analysis of the first goal. Kulusevski's looking to counter-attack before we've even got control of the ball to turn it over. So that comes from Ange, and Ange takes ownership. So he's got to take ownership for the mistakes. It doesn't matter who's making them, whether it's your goalkeeper, your defender, your midfielder, or your attacker, giving them away. I just think it's a whole big mishmash. And I said in my reaction video last night, Barnaby, I was like, after the Frankfurt game, I admitted I was wrong about the result. But a lot of people took that as they thought I'm back to being Ange, and maybe I do flip flop and I go backwards and forwards. But I think me and you have a similar opinion. We wanted Ange to work, but we're now admitting it hasn't and it can't.
But, sorry to interrupt, Sonny, but we're allowed to flip flop because, as I said in a video a month or so ago, it's like people accuse me of being reactive. I'm like, who's the most reactive person at Tottenham Hotspur? Ange Postecoglou. He bites at the fans when they have a go at him. He's the biggest reactive person. Also, how am I not going to be reactive? So I think you being allowed to flip flop is absolutely fine because we're just reacting on what we see.
We're fans. We're fans, and we're going to react to what we see with our eyes. And last night again, it's all it's all fart no poo. It's like it's all there, and you think, oh, it could all work, but then it's just we could have been out there all night long and we wouldn't have scored another goal. And I know we did, like, ended 2-1 or whatever.
Because we got a goal from our 48th cross of the night against Murillo and
what's the tactics there?
It's like, what? Oh, we got 1 out of 48. They scored from 2 crosses, 1 disallowed. They only had 5 crosses in the whole game.
Yeah, and people going like, oh, it's weird that Tottenham have got plus 10 goal difference and they sit where they are on the table. It's like, but we beat Southampton 5-0. Like, it's, we're either trouncing a team that's awful or we're losing narrowly to teams who, at the end of the day, Forest deserved that win last night. I can't hold it against them because they're savvy. They knew what they wanted to do. They counter-attacked us and they played the game well. And Nuno must be laughing. He must be sitting there going, well, I'm glad I avoided that shit show because I'm going to be playing Champions League football probably next year.
Yeah, although yes, the thing is though, there is I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's like there are different expectations at a club like Spurs than there are at Forest. So at Forest, he's at exactly the same or a similar size club to Wolves, and at Wolves he did a couple of really amazing seasons. Remember, he beat us at Wembley when he was at Wolves, and they would turn us over semi-regularly even when we had Poch. But then I think in a season or two's time, Forest will have a big drop and suddenly something will happen where it'll be like the chairman or the fans will demand a better style of football suddenly, just like at Leicester. They won the league and then they're trying to change the style of football. They win the FA Cup, but then they get relegated. Whereas with Spurs, it's like and this is where I think you have to give some credit to the board over the last 25 years. They have elevated the club to a point now where the expectations are of always finishing in the top 6, and therefore Nuno as a manager for Spurs, we knew very quickly was just never going to work and same with Jose and Conte in a way, which is, you get some good results. First 3 games we won under Nuno, for instance, good start under Jose, good start under Conte. But then the pundits and the fans, but via the pundits often, the pundits start going, oh, it's all well and good when you're winning, but you can't play like this if you're not winning anymore. But at Forest, actually you can. But at Spurs you couldn't. So that's why Nuno wouldn't really work as far as I'm concerned. But I agree with you totally. I thought Forest were going to win that all night. I had no doubt about it. Richarlison's header was a good one, but none of that. We never got in behind them. We never caused them any threat. And the reason for me that is because when you play a team like Forest, when they're on form like they are at the moment, you have to kind of more do what Everton did and just say to them, all right, you have the ball, and make them try and do something different, confuse them. And then if you get the first goal in that instance, then they have to come at you, and then you can pick them off. But Ange, that's where it's Ange's absolute refusal to do anything different. Although weirdly he did against Frankfurt, but that's why it was inevitable, I think, that we lost to Forest.
That's why I find it sometimes weird that, I mean, I don't know if it's Spurs fans or if it's Ange fans when they're like, oh, I don't want Thomas Frank. Oh, I don't want, managers like that. And it's like, but at least Thomas Frank, and this is why I potentially want him to replace Ange Postecoglou. At least when he goes into a game, he knows who he's facing, and he goes like, we're going to play this style. Against the big six, we might play a back five, and against other teams, we'll play with a back four. And then during the game, he's tweaking and changing. You see him with his whiteboard. Some people might find it a bit silly that he, does all that like tactical stuff. But Ange going out there, he knows that. You've just said it there. And there was the Sky showed it during the game, the momentum map. And there's no red on it at all. It's just all white like lines.
Yeah.
And it's like sometimes you've got to sit there and go like, tell them to come on to us, and then you can sort of pick their pockets and attack them. But it's just the same, and it doesn't work. The inverted fullbacks are not working. The midfield are overrun. It's just like, I don't know why some people are still so. I don't know if it is because the Europa League run and maybe that, give him the chance for that. But I just can't get my head around why some people are still backing it, because I don't know if it's because they're worried that, if we bring a Thomas Frank in or an Iriola, that Levy's, it's the same cycle. But there's no point putting up with this anyway, like Ange or not. It's terrible football. It's not getting us anywhere.
It's also not the same cycle anymore, because I think one of the main reasons that Ange still has his job is because of the amount of times that Spurs, a big corner of the Spurs support space, have said it's the same cycle. You sack managers too early, etc. So Levy's gone, all right, well, I'm going to stick with this guy. And look, it might end up being the best decision he ever made if we somehow do win the Europa League. But I'm afraid to say it is more likely, based on our experience as Spurs fans, that we will lose to Bodo Glimt in the two-legged semi-final, and then we'll be a meme again. But, I'm hopeful that I'm wrong, and I'm hoping that Ange does bring it home. But yeah, I just think, and to add to what you're saying, and I've said it numerous times, the reason Ange will lose his job is because we concede the same goal over and over again. It's either a counter-attacking goal, or it's a cross, or it's a cross that comes from a counter-attack. But for me, if I knew, Ali Gold, or if I knew Dan Kilpatrick, or any of those guys who are in the room with him, I would ask them, I'd say to them, can you please ask him, why do Spurs concede the same goal time and time again? It must be so easy for opposition analysts to just go, yeah, cut back on your right, because Porro's not going to try and block the cross very much, and he's certainly not going to get any help from his wide forward in trying to stop the cross. And then, your big man, Chris Wood, or whoever it is, can come up in between the two centre-backs who are never going to man mark. It's too easy. And
also, we try and score the same goal. Like, it must be so easy. Because even yesterday, when we're starting to pump it in and cross it, you've said it there, against three of the most physical centre-backs in the Premier League. I just don't understand sometimes his approach to games, and thinking that, if it's not Tell getting to the byline and crossing it to a Johnson or De Beer on the other side, it just gets really frustrating. And then I feel sorry for the likes of Solanke, because I feel like this team doesn't fit him, because it's not, we're not giving him any service. We're asking him to drop deeper than I feel like Harry Kane ever did to try and get the ball. Yeah. And the midfield is just not being helped either. It's just, there's no positive signs whatever throughout this whole team where you go like, oh, actually, we will keep him on because, there was this good flow or attack or whatever. Yeah. And that really contradicts what I was saying on Thursday, because I thought Thursday was the best game of football I think we've seen us play all season, maybe. It's really hard to pick a top game. But again, we changed our approach. And the other problem is if people are saying, well, keep Ange, look how good we are in the Europa League. But if we're making 4, 5, 6 changes, that's not good enough either, because, you hope that and I think when we do make these changes, it's not like we're bringing in awful players. We're still bringing in players who we think are good enough to be at the football club. But I just think, one, the players can't play that style. And when they do, we've seen the injuries, we've seen the, detriment it has on the squad. I just can't. I've said it already. I sound like a broken record. I just
Yeah,
can't
we
get my
both
head
do. We
around.
both do. I mean, what I liked about Frankfurt as well, both legs, is, as an example, that shot that Bergvall hit in the first leg, we don't hit shots from outside the box, and he hit the stanchion with it. And in a game against Forest like that, right, take some shots from outside the box because it might ricochet a couple of times. In fact, you remember one of the things that happened yesterday? We put them under a bit of pressure in their own box. They tried to whack it clear, and it ricocheted off one of their own men straight into Richarlison. And that can happen when you're taking long shots. So what you said about us trying to score the same goal is so true. Like yesterday, there were more crosses than usual, which I thought was surprising. There are some games where I'm like, put more crosses in because they're not that great defensively. But last night we did it against a team where you'd be like, I mean, they brought a third centre back on in the second half and they were doing it. It was completely mental. But then it is always trying to score the same goal, get to the byline. But in a game like yesterday, when they had 3 centre backs in the second half, of course those centre backs are going to get to your cutback every single time. That is what's going to happen. Anyway, just before we finish, just want to move on to this. Ange, he was asked, what message do you have for the fans? He said, I don't need to say anything to the fans. They're disappointed and angry. I don't need to tell them anything. They're clearly not happy with the results. Neither am I, or the players. I don't think motivation is an issue. It's a lack of focus and concentration. It's a constant with us. Now, I just wanted to bring that up because I was saying throughout the watch along and probably in my post-match as well, that Spurs in the Premier League are so clearly on the beach, it is untrue, by which I mean, it is the cliche used for April and May every season when the teams have got nothing to fight for. And for me, it's like they are so clearly 15 to 20% off in the Premier League. You can see it against a team like Forest, against a team like Wolves, when they are second to every 50-50 and to every second ball. So to some degree, for Ange then to come out and say, I don't think motivation is an issue, he's making us like we're mugs. Like just don't say it. Like, I'm not expecting you to come out and say, oh, they're on the beach, they're 20% off. But just say, look, in reality, it's all about a week on Thursday. Like it is. And also, bring in some of the kids. I would have brought in some of the kids. At least Man United under Amorim, they are being totally transparent. They're going, yeah, we're going to play some of the kids. Because then when you play the kids in games like that, you're still going to lose, but they're getting some experience. Whereas these kind of, like you said, the kind of second stringy, the 5 or 6 players who are not going to play in that first leg against Bodo, they come in each time and they flatter to deceive.
Yeah, and I feel like they don't want to get injured, some of those players. Even last night, the decision to play maybe Van der Ven in that game, I'm a bit... Because also what we've noticed is when this first team are playing together, it's like they've never been apart, So there isn't that risk of, chucking Van der Ven into these games. But I look at that last night. You play 45 minutes with your starting centre-backs. You then bring on 2 different ones. It just seems like it is a lot of confusion at the moment. And I'm sitting there worried, like even watching Kulusevski last night, I still feel like he's not up to the pace. So I would have started, that made sense. Like he needs a bit more game time. But then bringing Solanke on at the end and Bergvall, I'm like, there's literally no point of risking any of these players. And even Vicario, maybe, Kinski, give him some minutes because, put in Vicario, who's made, look, I think Vicario was great against Frankfurt in both games, but between that, he's made 6, what has he made? Like 4 mistakes in 2 games. Yeah. So that can't do them the world of good. And then also, and I'm not a psychologist, but looking at the outside, it can't be good psychologically to be going into these games and getting absolutely tanked and beaten, and then thinking, actually, we're I always believe in momentum. You want to get a bit of a run. Even if we drew yesterday, it would have been like, right,
we don't draw, mate. We don't draw.
That is true. But you put that behind us and you go, like, this will fuel, hopefully, a strong end to the season, because I've just never known, like, there to be a situation where I feel like, putting one priority over the other. I've seen it like a couple of times, but I've never known, like, maybe the only team I can think has been in this situation was Wigan when they won the FA Cup and then they got relegated. Usually, even West Ham when they were in the conference in Europa, they were always around the mid-table mark. It is quite surprising. But then again, as you say, Man United are going through the same, but at least they're honest. I'd rather just see some minutes for proper academy talent who, not Archie Gray or not Bergvall, those youngsters. It's like the kids of the kids.
Yeah, Mike Moore, Ajayi, those kind of guys. Dane Scarlett, where's he dropped off to? Listen, I agree. Just one thing about the Van der Ven thing, though. I didn't realize, I hadn't been kind of checking out the calendar, but I didn't realize before yesterday that actually there is now only Liverpool before that first leg. So actually, I think what he's probably doing is saying to Van der Ven, you get 45 minutes yesterday and you get 45 minutes against Liverpool, and that'll do you. But actually, if he doesn't play Van der Ven against Liverpool, I'd be more happy with that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
look. Anyway, good chat. Let's just end it on this. I'm going to ask you a few difficult questions. Postecoglou wins the Europa League. Are you sacking him? Are you letting him on the? You're letting him on the open top bus, and then you're sacking him the next day?
I hate this question because it's so awkward, isn't it? Because it just makes sense to keep him, but I heard Abby Summers say it this morning, and I just maybe we sack him. We don't want like a Eric Ten Hag situation, and we don't want like do a Louis Van Gaal, win on a high. Because even I could see a situation where he could walk away from it, maybe
Well,
go right.
that
I'll
was
give
going to
you
be
the
my
keys to the
second
team.
point. I've been saying this. I think he might resign. I think that would be such an Ange thing to do, and then he will be like held in high esteem forever and ever, like Keith Birkinshaw.
Yeah, and then be like, I told you I'd win in my second season. Thank you, good night, much love. And he walks off into the sunset and goes back to another league. I mean, I sound like a right cynic, Barnaby, but I can't see it. Even like, it's the proper Spurs mentality that we go, right, who do we want in the final? And it's like, no, we've got to face Bodo Glimt first. And they are literally no mugs.
No, they're brilliant.
Yeah, so we got to really be careful what we wish
I watched
for.
that Lazio first leg, and they were brilliant. And actually, I said this for the Frankfurt game as well. I really think it's to our favor, that we're home the first leg, because against Frankfurt, if we'd had them away first leg, or Bodo Glimt, there's a chance we could be kind of blown away. Because don't forget, we went to a 3-4G pitch against Tamworth, and that was not fun to watch. So it will not be easy in Bodo.
Yeah. I just, it always makes me more nervous, especially because, we've got to remember 4G pitch. We've been there this season. We couldn't beat Tamworth in 90 minutes. We got to realise the level we're at. But this is what makes this Spurs side really, I keep using the word confusing, the C word. I just feel like we don't know what we're going to get served up week in, week out. We can go and blow Manchester City 4-0 away at the Etihad, and we're like, wow, we're back. And then we can just come crashing back down to earth and, lose 18 games in the Premier League season. I never thought I'd see it. And I've talked to my dad, who's, obviously he's a Spurs fan as well. And he's like, this is worse than Aussie. This is worse than the 90s. This is worse than Sugar. Like and I'm sitting there going like, yeah, the worst I remember was like, the one day Ramos and sort of Harry Redknapp coming in and saving the day. So yeah, it's strange. It's a strange thing. And, if we win that Europa League, then, and we'll have credit in the bag, but I can just see a situation where we go into the league next year and we sit in a poor position and it's not good enough. And, maybe it is just because and sorry, I keep rambling on, but my final point would be, I'm more surprised that this football is working in knockout football than it is in league football. Maybe it's just, a league is a good barometer to measure how good a team actually is, like consistency wise. And we're the most inconsistent team in the league. But yeah, I mean, it's just we got to take that first leg and really, try and get a few goals and then go out to theirs and just,
11 men behind the ball.
Yeah,
exactly.
How we did against Brentford and that.
Yeah. All right, Sonny, listen, thanks so much for coming on the show. Once again, remind the audience where they can find your stuff.
Yes, Sonny Talk Spurs on YouTube. Type that in the search box at the top. I've got videos going up, nearly every other day. And then Sonny Snelling on my TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. Usually got videos going up on there as well in short
Brilliant
content.
Top man, guys, make sure you go and follow Sonny, check out his stuff. And although it's a bit of an ugly Tuesday after last night, there's still that kind of feeling of, well, we're in the semis, so it doesn't matter. But as it gets closer to Bodo next week, and of course a trip to Anfield before then, what could possibly go wrong there? Still, you never know what could happen. Come on, you Spurs.